What if a harmless diner wasn't just serving food, but feeding something far worse? When Daniel takes a job at the remote Lone Star Diner, he quickly learns it isn't just another greasy spoon, it's a containment zone for something not entirely human. The Wanderer watches. The rules keep him at bay, but when Daniel breaks those rules, the thin wall between reality and horror begins to shatter. As night falls, twisted versions of himself and his children emerge from beyond, forcing Daniel into an impossible choice, with humanity itself hanging in the balance. Do not speak to the man in the corner. Those were the first words Melanie whispered to me on my first shift at Lone Star Diner. She didn't say welcome or you'll do fine, no smile. Just those 7 words, spoken in a low, deliberate tone as her sharp eyes pinned mine. The air inside the diner smelled like fried eggs, black coffee, and something faintly metallic I couldn't place. Outside, the Nevada desert stretched endlessly beneath a pale blue sky. Carson City sat far enough behind me now to feel like another world. It answered an ad that promised $50 an hour, an absurdly generous wage for waiting tables at a roadside diner in the middle of nowhere. That should have been my first warning, but I was desperate. After everything that had happened, after Lisa's death, after becoming a single father to Alicia and Jay, I needed the money. I needed something that felt safe, ordinary, predictable. I quickly learned that Lone Star Diner was none of those things. Melanie led me behind the counter, her voice flat as she ran through the rest of my orientation. You'll memorize the specials, keep the floors spotless, and serve the regulars politely. The menu is simple. Stick to it. The coffee is always fresh, no matter what time. And above all, she paused and nodded toward the far corner booth. You do not engage with him, ever. I followed her gaze. The booth sat half hidden in shadow, despite the afternoon sunlight pouring through the wide windows. At first glance, the man sitting there could have been anyone. A customer lost in thought, perhaps some lonely traveler stopping for a late lunch. But the longer I looked, the more something inside me recoiled. He sat too still. His posture was too upright, his back too straight. The dark brown corduroy jacket he wore looked oddly pristine, almost outdated, like it belonged to someone who hadn't purchased clothing since the 1950s. His head was tilted ever so slightly downward, as if studying the surface of the table, but I sensed, no, I knew, he was watching us, watching me. His smile was faint, thin, almost courteous, but his eyes, I couldn't see them from this distance, and somehow that unsettled me more. Who is he? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Melanie shook her head. Don't ask questions you don't want the answers to. She exhaled through her nose and softened slightly. Just follow the rules, Daniel. They exist for a reason. I nodded, trying to swallow the lump forming in my throat. The rest of my shift passed in a strange blur of greasy plates, small talk with truckers, and the perpetual hum of the old neon sign flickering above the entrance. The diner had that faded Americana charm you'd expect from these roadside relics. Vinyl booths, black and white checkered floors, chrome napkin holder, but the atmosphere was wrong. It wasn't just the man in the corner. It was the way the other customers studiously avoided even glancing toward him. The way the regulars spoke in hushed voices and left generous tips without making eye contact with any of the staff. Around 11 p.m., as I wiped down a counter sticky with syrup, I finally gathered the nerve to speak again. Melanie, has anyone ever tried talking to him? She stiffened instantly. Don't! Her voice was sharp this time, and her hand clamped around my wrist with surprising strength. Don't even think about it. I flinched. I was just... That's how it starts, she cut me off. Her expression softened when she saw the panic flicker across my face. I know you're curious, Daniel. Everyone is at first. But curiosity gets people hurt in places like this. I wanted to ask how people got hurt. I wanted to ask what happens if someone breaks the rule. But some primal instinct inside me, the same part that had whispered warnings about the man in the corner, told me not to press her. Not tonight. Melanie released my wrist and sighed. You're doing fine, she said quietly. But understand this. This job pays what it pays because you're not just serving coffee here. You're helping maintain balance. That balance keeps you, me, and everyone else alive. The word balance echoed ominously in my mind. Just after midnight, my first shift finally ended. Melanie locked the doors and began counting the register, while I stepped out into the cold desert air. The sky above me was a cathedral of stars, vast, silent, and endless. But I couldn't shake the sensation that something was still watching me. That something inside the diner wasn't confined to its walls. Driving home, I kept replaying the man's faint smile over and over. The rule made sense in a strange, unsettling way. I didn't want to get closer to him, and yet, part of me already had. The days that followed blurred into one another. Lone Star Diner operated with a rhythm unlike any place I had ever worked. It was a strange harmony of repetition and dread. Regulars trickling in and out, coffee poured endlessly, orders taken and delivered with mechanical efficiency. On the surface, it was ordinary. Beneath that surface, however, was something festering. The man in the corner, the wanderer, as I heard Melanie refer to him in one of her more unguarded moments, maintained his quiet, unsettling presence. Always arriving around the same time, always sitting at the same booth, always leaving just before closing. He never ordered anything, he never spoke, and yet his existence permeated every square inch of the diner. I noticed how the other employees subtly avoided even looking in his direction. The more seasoned servers like Greg and Linda never passed by his table unless absolutely necessary. Even the cook, Ed, kept glancing nervously toward the front of house whenever the door chimed, as though confirming whether he had arrived. You'll get used to it, Linda whispered one afternoon as we polished the napkin dispensers. It's like background noise after a while. But I wasn't getting used to it. Each night I left Lone Star Diner, I felt like I was dragging something home with me. Something invisible that clung to my skin and refused to let go. It began to affect my sleep. I would wake up at 3 o'clock IOM, heart pounding, unsure if I had dreamed the sensation of being watched or if some fragment of that presence had followed me into my bedroom. More than once, I caught myself staring out my window at nothing, searching for a pair of unseen eyes watching from the darkness. I didn't tell Alicia or Jay anything about it. They were too young to carry this kind of weight. Melanie remained calm, detached, almost surgical about the entire situation. But I could sense a heaviness behind her eyes, like someone who had seen too much, but had long since accepted her role in this strange little ecosystem. Late one night, as I wiped down the countertop, I dared to broach the subject again. How long has he been coming here? Melanie's hands froze mid-mash, clutching the rag tightly before slowly continuing her wiping. Longer than you've been alive, she answered flatly. I swallowed hard. And no one ever tries to stop him? You can't stop what you don't understand, she replied, voice lower than before. We manage it. That's the best anyone can do. The words manage it felt chilling in their simplicity. I should have let the conversation end there, but something compelled me to ask the question I had been suppressing since my first shift. What happens if someone breaks the rule? Her head turned sharply toward me, eyes flashing with something I hadn't seen before. Fear. They don't come back, Daniel. I blinked. What do you mean? They disappear? Melanie's voice was quiet now, almost reverent. They leave with him, sometimes willingly, sometimes not, but they're never seen again. I felt my stomach drop. But why? Melanie exhaled, rubbing her temples as though the weight of the knowledge itself was exhausting. Because this place isn't just some roadside diner, it's a containment zone. The government doesn't advertise it that way, of course, but that's what it is. That revelation twisted my insides. Government? You mean they know? They do more than know, Melanie said bitterly. They monitor, they study, and they keep us here, feeding the illusion of normalcy as long as we follow the rules. Before I could process the magnitude of what she was telling me, the door chime rang softly behind us. He had arrived. The wanderer moved like clockwork, each step smooth, deliberate, as though rehearsed for decades. His corduroy jacket barely shifted as he crossed the tiled floor and slid into his booth in the far corner. For a brief moment, I caught a clearer glimpse of his face under the dim light. His skin was pale, almost waxen. The smile remained thin and unchanging, like it had been painted onto him long ago, and while his head remained tilted slightly downward, his eyes, black, vacant, bottomless, locked onto mine across the room. It was only for a moment, a heartbeat, but it was enough to send an icy lance through my chest. Melanie's hand clamped down on my wrist again, harder than before. She leaned in, her voice urgent. "Daniel, look away!" I obeyed, wrenching my gaze toward the counter as my pulse hammered behind my ears. The rest of the night passed in tense silence. No orders were placed, no conversations were held. Only the faint hum of the neon sign and the steady clicking of the old ceiling fan filled the heavy air. Finally, closing time approached. The wanderer rose from his booth as smoothly as he had arrived. With one final glance that I dared not meet, he walked toward the exit. The bell chimed softly as the door closed behind him, and the oppressive weight in the room seemed to lift marginally. Melanie exhaled, releasing my arm. "You did good," she whispered, though her voice trembled slightly. We locked the doors and cleaned up in exhausted silence. But as I stepped outside under the clear desert sky, the stars overhead seemed colder than before, more distant somehow. And then I saw him. Far beyond the edge of the parking lot, near the dark outline of the sagebrush, he stood, the same silhouette, the same stillness. Even from this distance, I felt the force of his gaze pressing against me like invisible hands. He should not have been there. He was never supposed to be outside the diner. The rules were breaking. I froze, breath caught in my throat, unable to move. And then, without warning, the wanderer raised his hand slowly and waved. Malcolm broke the rule, and then he disappeared. That was what Melanie whispered to me 2 weeks later, her voice barely audible over the soft clinking of dishes and the low murmur of the late-night regulars. I hadn't seen the wanderer again since that night in the parking lot. Not outside, at least. Inside the diner, however, his presence remained painfully consistent. Every few nights, he returned to his usual booth, silently observing, as if keeping some ancient appointment. My pulse still quickened each time I saw him walk through the door. That faint smile, that waxen face, that hollow gaze. I was no closer to understanding what he was, but my dread had grown heavier with every shift. Then came Malcolm. He was young, barely out of college, probably not much older than 22, fresh-faced, eager, with a nervous energy that made him want to prove himself constantly. I saw something of myself in him from my first days here, that same hunger to understand the rules, the same curiosity gnawing at the edges. But where I had hesitated, Malcolm pushed. On his first shift, I watched him pepper Melanie with question after question. What's the story with the guy in the corner? Is this one of those crazy urban legends? Some government witness protection thing? Is he a mob boss or something? Melanie's answers were clipped, non-committal. She was patient at first, but I could see the subtle tightening of her jaw as Malcolm kept probing. "You'll learn what you need to learn," she finally told him flatly, handing him an apron. "If you're smart, you won't ask again." Of course he did. Malcolm wasn't wired to leave things alone, and that made him dangerous. Over the next week, he kept trying to start conversations about the wanderer with the rest of the staff. Most of them simply ignored him. Some shot him nervous glances, as if afraid his curiosity would draw unwanted attention. One night, as I wiped down the counter, he leaned toward me, lowering his voice. "Come on, man. You've been here longer. Don't pretend like you're not curious. Who is he?" I glanced toward the far booth. The wanderer was there, as always. His stillness felt more oppressive than usual tonight, like some invisible pressure weighed down the entire diner. A few regulars had quietly slipped out early. Even Melanie kept darting her eyes toward the door, her unease palpable. I kept my voice low, almost a whisper. "Malcolm, don't. I'm serious." "But why?" Malcolm whispered back, frustrated. "Nobody's even serving him. He just sits there. Every time. I mean, if no one's ever talked to him, how do we even know there's a danger?" I clenched my jaw, trying not to let my rising panic leak into my voice. "You don't need to test it to find out." But the gleam in Malcolm's eyes was unmistakable. He had already made up his mind. The next night, Melanie called out sick. For the first time since I'd started working at Lone Star, she never called out. Ever. I arrived to find Malcolm already behind the counter, wiping down the coffee station with the enthusiasm of someone who didn't yet understand the weight pressing down on this place. "Looks like it's just us tonight," he said with a grin. "Time for me to finally prove I can handle a solo shift." I wanted to tell him to leave. I wanted to tell him to quit, to get out while he still could, but I knew it was too late. The diner stayed mostly empty for the first hour of the shift. The regulars must have sensed it, the tension in the air, the electric charge that always seemed to precede the wanderer's arrival. And then the door chimed. He entered like a shadow slipping into place. Same jacket, same pale face, same eternal smile. He crossed the diner, eyes fixed downward, and slid into his booth. The corner seemed to darken slightly, like the light bent away from him. The air grew heavier, denser. I immediately turned away, focusing on wiping down a table that didn't need cleaning. My palms were slick with sweat. Malcolm stood behind the counter, staring. "He's here again," he whispered unnecessarily. "Malcolm," I hissed under my breath. "Don't. Do not." But he was already moving. At first, he didn't approach directly. He busied himself by refilling salt shakers, adjusting menus, wiping down nearby tables, each movement bringing him incrementally closer to the forbidden booth. I watched in frozen horror as he finally crossed the invisible boundary that none of us had dared cross. He stood beside the Wanderer's table, pen and order pad in hand. "Good evening, sir," Malcolm said cheerily, voice steady. "Can I get you anything to eat tonight?" The Wanderer didn't move. Malcolm shifted slightly, undeterred. "Coffee? Pie? Anything?" Still nothing. Then the Wanderer slowly lifted his head. Their eyes met. I couldn't hear what was said next. The words were too low, too quiet. But I saw the Wanderer's lips move. A faint whisper, like the rustle of dry leaves. Malcolm's smile faltered. He leaned in closer, as if straining to hear. His expression shifted. First confusion, then something darker. His pupils dilated, his face drained of color. And then the lights above flickered. The hum of the neon sign outside warbled like a distorted radio frequency. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound escaped. The moment stretched unnaturally long, and then with a final flicker of light, both Malcolm and the Wanderer were gone. Simply gone. The booth sat empty, the air returned to its normal weight. The hum of the appliances stabilized, the diner fell deathly quiet. I stood there, trembling, my knees weak, my throat dry. Malcolm had broken the rule, and he had disappeared. The hours that followed Malcolm's disappearance were a blur of silence, panic, and numbness. I stood there for several minutes frozen, staring at the empty booth where moments ago, both the Wanderer and Malcolm had existed. My brain refused to process what my eyes had witnessed. It was as if my mind kept short-circuiting every time I replayed the moment they both vanished. No sound, no flash of light, no smoke or special effects, just absence. When my legs finally allowed me to move, I stumbled toward the counter and gripped its edge, trying to steady myself. The diner hummed as if nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. The coffee pot still gurgled softly behind me. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, swaying just slightly in the desert wind outside. It all felt wrong, horribly wrong, because it was too normal. My trembling hands reached for my phone, but I paused. Call who? The police? What would I even say? Officer, my coworker spoke to a man we weren't supposed to talk to, and now they both blinked out of existence. Even in my panic, I knew how that would sound. The unwelcome weight of complete isolation settled on my shoulders. As I stood there, trying to gather what little composure I had left, the faint buzz of the front door sensor startled me. The door had not opened. No one had entered. But the chime rang once, soft and deliberate, as if something unseen had passed through. The temperature dropped several degrees. That's when the agents arrived. They came through the back entrance, 2 men in dark suits and plain ties, one carrying a small, hard-sided briefcase. A third followed closely behind, a taller man with a quiet, practiced authority about him. His hair was clipped short, military style, and a discreet earpiece coiled into his right ear. Special Agent Cole? I had seen him once before during my first month at Lone Star Diner, during what Melanie cryptically referred to as a government audit. I had never spoken to him directly, but I remembered his face clearly. Expressionless, analytical, cold. Without even glancing at me, Cole swept through the diner as if he owned it, moving straight to the empty booth. He stared at the seat for several seconds, his face unreadable. The other agents began unpacking instruments from their case, scanning devices I didn't recognize, sleek metal probes that emitted faint beeps as they swept across the booth. Cole finally turned toward me. His voice was calm, but carried weight. "You witnessed the event, Mr. Carter?" I swallowed. My mouth was dry as sandpaper. "Yes." He nodded once. "Describe it." I hesitated. Malcolm approached the booth. He spoke to the subject. Then they vanished, like they were never there. Cole's expression didn't change, but one of the junior agents scribbled notes on a small digital tablet. "Did the Wanderer say anything audible before the disappearance?" "I couldn't hear," I admitted. "It was too quiet." Cole's gaze held mine for a few seconds longer than was comfortable, as though he was searching for any hint of deception or instability. Apparently satisfied, he finally nodded to himself. "You did not approach the booth?" I shook my head quickly. "No, I followed the rule." A faint flicker of approval crossed his face. "Good." He turned back to the booth as the agents continued their scans. For several minutes they worked in silence while I stood by the counter, my stomach churning. Finally, Cole broke the silence. "You'll remain on staff." I blinked in surprise. "What?" "We still need observers here," he said matter-of-factly. "This incident changes nothing. The protocol remains. You understand?" But my voice cracked and I had to force it steady. "Malcolm's gone." Just like that. "Isn't someone going to—" "There's nothing to retrieve," Cole interrupted. "He's no longer within jurisdiction." The way he said it made my skin crawl. Cole glanced back toward me one last time. "And Mr. Carter, for your own safety, do not speculate, do not theorize, and above all else, do not interfere." With that, he and his men gathered their equipment and exited through the same rear door, leaving me once again in the unsettling quiet of Lone Star Diner. Days passed. The next shift came, then the next. The regulars returned, as if nothing had occurred. No one asked about Malcolm. Melanie returned to work 2 days later, looking more tired than I'd ever seen her. She didn't mention her absence. She didn't ask what had happened in her absence. She didn't need to. She already knew. At one point, as we both cleaned behind the counter late one night, I found the courage to speak. Was this his first time? Melanie didn't look up. "No." "How many others?" Her voice was flat. 10, maybe more. I struggled to process it. The sense of horror wasn't just from Malcolm's disappearance. It was knowing how routine this was, how many had come before him, how easily their absence was absorbed into the diner's twisted rhythm. "Why does the government let this continue?" I whispered. Melanie finally looked at me, her eyes hollow. "Because it's not about stopping him, Daniel. It's about observing him." I shook my head, my breath shaky. "Observing what?" She exhaled. "A visitor." The word hit me like a hammer. I wanted to press for more, but the warning in her eyes told me not to. Another week passed. The wanderer returned. He entered as usual, sliding into his booth without so much as a glance toward anyone. His thin smile was unchanged. His empty plate remained untouched. But this time, as I briefly glanced up from behind the counter, I saw something new. In the booth where Malcolm had once stood, where his body should have been, there was now a small object resting on the table. A white box, perfectly square, tied with a thin red ribbon. It hadn't been there before. My stomach twisted violently as I realized who had left it. The wanderer slowly lifted his head, his hollow eyes locking directly onto mine for a fraction of a second. His smile widened, and then he vanished. The box remained. "Daddy, the man next door is staring at me again." Alicia's voice cracked as she whispered from the doorway to my bedroom. Her small frame was silhouetted by the faint light from the hallway nightlight. For a moment I thought I was still dreaming, but the panic in her voice snapped me awake instantly. I sat up straight, my heart already racing. "What did you say, sweetheart?" She fidgeted, hugging her arms tightly around her waist. "The man next door. He was looking in through my window again. I saw him." A chill ran through me. Ever since taking the job at Lone Star Diner, I'd begun to sense that the strangeness there was bleeding into my home life. Small things at first, shadows in the corner of my eye, a creeping sensation of being watched at odd hours, subtle shifts in the temperature of the room. But this was different. This was Alicia. I glanced over at the clock on my nightstand. 3:12 IE Mim. Always between 3 and 4. Always the hour when nothing good ever happens. I slipped out of bed, trying to remain calm for her sake. "All right, let's go take a look." She followed closely behind me as we made our way down the hall toward the kids' room. My son, Jay, remained asleep in his lower bunk, snoring softly beneath a pile of cartoon dinosaur blankets. Alicia's bed sat above him, but she hadn't returned to it. I approached the window slowly, peering through the partially closed curtains. Outside, the neighboring house sat dark and still, under the pale glow of the moon. The property lines between the two homes weren't separated by fences, just patches of thin grass and an empty gravel driveway. On the far side, the neighbor's kitchen window faced directly toward my children's room. But I saw nothing now, just stillness. The kind of stillness that makes your skin itch. "Are you sure you saw him, honey?" I asked gently. Alicia nodded, her lip trembling. "He was smiling again." That single word froze me more than anything else, because it wasn't the first time. 2 weeks earlier, Alicia had mentioned it casually at breakfast, that she sometimes saw the man in the neighboring house, watching her through the window at night. At first, I assumed it was just leftover anxiety from all the changes we'd been through lately. The move, the new job, the strange hours. Kids are sensitive to things like that. But then, Jay had woken up screaming one night, crying that the man outside was making faces. He wasn't prone to night terrors. And when both of them, on separate occasions, described similar encounters, I began to worry. Not in the way I should have, though. Back then, I'd tried to rationalize it. Maybe the neighbor had an odd sleeping schedule. Maybe he smoked by the window. Maybe it was just nothing. I desperately wanted it to be nothing. Now, looking at Alicia's frightened face in the dim light, I knew better. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. The neighbor himself was an odd man. Middle-aged, quiet, private. I'd seen him perhaps twice since we moved in, which while collecting his mail, another time when he was dragging his trash cans out to the curb. Both times he barely made eye contact, offered only a stiff nod, and quickly retreated indoors. He lived alone, no wife, no kids, no visitors. His blinds were always drawn shut, his porch light rarely turned on. I couldn't recall ever seeing any activity inside his home, even at normal hours. I watched his house a moment longer, searching for any hint of movement behind the curtains. Nothing. Still, the knot in my stomach tightened. "Come sleep in my room tonight," I said to Alicia softly, guiding her away from the window. She clung to my arm. "I don't want him looking at me anymore." "You won't have to," I promised, though even as the words left my mouth, I wasn't sure I believed them. The next morning, after dropping the kids off at school, I drove slowly past the neighbor's house before heading into work. His old pickup truck still sat parked crookedly in the driveway. The curtains remained drawn. No sign of life inside. For a brief moment, I considered knocking, confronting him, but something about that idea made my chest tighten involuntarily, like my instincts were screaming, "Not yet, not like this." Instead, I drove on. When I arrived at Lone Star, Melanie was already behind the counter, pouring coffee for one of the early regulars. She glanced up as I walked in, studying my face carefully. "You didn't sleep," she said simply. I shook my head. "Bad dreams?" "Something like that." She nodded but said nothing else. I wanted to tell her, to explain what had been happening at home, to ask if she thought this was somehow connected to him, to the Wanderer, to whatever forces we were dancing around nightly inside this cursed diner. But the unspoken rules here extended beyond work. Some things are better left unsaid. By the time I returned home late that night, exhaustion had wrapped itself around me like a heavy blanket. Alicia and Jay were already asleep, their nightlights casting soft orange glows across their little faces. I paused outside their door longer than usual, listening. Everything was still. Satisfied for now, I turned to head toward my own room when I noticed it. The window. Not the one in their bedroom, the one across the hall leading to the backyard. It was unlocked. I knew I'd locked every window before leaving for work. I always did, especially lately. My pulse quickened as I quietly approached, checking the frame. There, faintly etched into the condensation on the glass, was a single long streak, like a finger had slowly drawn downward along the pane. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. Someone had been here, watching. I locked the window again, pulling the curtains tightly shut. But long after I crawled into bed, sleep wouldn't come. 'Cause I couldn't shake the image that crept into my head. That somewhere out there in the shadows behind glass and curtains and fragile walls, the neighbor was still smiling. The next few days passed in a state of tightening dread. I doubled down on checking the locks every night. Every window, every door, every blind pulled shut tight. Yet, no matter how many times I checked, I couldn't shake the feeling that it didn't matter. That locks and curtains were paper shields against something far older, far stranger than I could understand. And Alicia kept seeing him. "Daddy, he was there again last night," she whispered to me as I packed her lunch one morning. He was smiling bigger this time. Her voice trembled slightly, though she tried to sound brave. She wasn't lying. She wasn't imagining it. Whatever this was, it was escalating. The thing that haunted me wasn't just that he was there, but how Alicia described him. Always smiling, always standing still, always staring. But most unsettling of all were the small details she added each time. Details no child should invent. Details that made my stomach twist. This morning, she added, his arms were longer. I asked, heart pounding. Alicia nodded slowly. They weren't normal, Daddy. They went way down, almost to his knees. I tried not to let my face betray the deep sinking horror building inside me. That night, after putting both kids to bed, I sat in the living room for hours, eyes locked on the window, waiting for any sign of movement across the lawn. Nothing. But around 2:45 a.m., just before that cursed window of time always seemed to open, I heard it. A faint clicking sound. It was soft, almost polite, like someone lightly tapping their fingernails against glass. Tap, tap, tap. I froze, heart hammering, straining to pinpoint the sound. It was coming from the kids' room. Without thinking, I grabbed the baseball bat I kept beside the couch and moved swiftly, silently down the hall. I pressed my ear against their door. The tapping continued, soft and steady. Carefully, I turned the knob, cracking the door open just enough to peek inside. Jay was fast asleep, snuggled deep under his covers. Alicia lay awake, wide-eyed, clutching her stuffed bear to her chest. And there, just beyond the half-closed curtains, was the unmistakable silhouette. The neighbor. Or at least, something that still wore the shape of the neighbor. He stood perfectly still, just outside the window, bathed in moonlight. His head tilted ever so slightly to the left, his mouth stretched into that same unnatural grin. But now, just as Alicia had described, his arms hung too low, unnaturally long, ending in pale, bony fingers that gently tapped against the glass. Tap, tap, tap. The bat slipped from my sweaty grip, clattering softly against the carpet. His head twitched suddenly at the noise, and for one horrifying instant, his black, empty eyes locked directly onto mine through the small gap in the curtains. I staggered backward, gasping. As if on cue, the tapping stopped. The figure stepped back into the shadows, melting into the dark like fog. I slammed the door shut and locked it, pulling Alicia into my arms. "It's okay, sweetheart," I whispered, trying to calm the shaking in my own voice more than hers. "It's okay." But it wasn't okay, not even close. The next morning, I finally made a decision. I couldn't pretend anymore. After dropping the kids at school, I marched straight across the street, up the short gravel path, and pounded on the neighbor's door. No response. I knocked again, harder this time. "Open up!" Still nothing. I checked the driveway. His pickup truck was still there, exactly where it always sat, collecting layers of desert dust. My gut twisted. Without fully thinking it through, I gripped the doorknob and gave it a turn. Unlocked. The door creaked open, revealing only darkness inside. Every instinct screamed for me to walk away, to call the police, to not step inside that house. But something stronger pulled me forward. Rage, fear, desperation, I didn't know which. I entered. The house smelled wrong. Not rotten or moldy, just off. A sterile metallic coldness that reminded me eerily of Lone Star Diner's air whenever the wanderer was present. The living room was spotless but unnervingly sparse. A couch, a chair, a single lamp, all arranged too perfectly as if set for display rather than comfort. No photographs, no personal touches, no signs of life. As I crept deeper, the silence thickened. Even the floorboards beneath my feet refused to creak. I reached the hallway leading to what must have been his bedroom. The door was ajar. Inside was only a single mattress on the floor, sheets tucked tight like in a hospital ward. Next to it sat a small wooden nightstand. On it, placed with almost ritualistic care, was a single object. A photograph. I stepped closer. The photo showed Alicia and Jay playing in our backyard, taken from across the street, taken from his house. My stomach twisted into knots. As I reached for the picture, something shifted behind me. A faint rustle, like fabric brushing against the wall. I spun around, ready to confront whoever or whatever was there. But the hallway was empty. No one. The house remained still. I stumbled backward, nearly slipping, my heart hammering. I had seen enough. By the time the police arrived, the house was completely empty. No furniture, no bed, no truck in the driveway. Gone. As if the house had swallowed itself whole, the officer who interviewed me exchanged uneasy glances with his partner, but took my statement nonetheless. They promised to investigate further, but I knew better. The world I had stepped into didn't leave evidence, not the kind normal people could investigate. That night, as I sat by Alicia's bedside, she stirred awake, blinking up at me with tired, worried eyes. "Daddy? Is he gone?" I wanted so badly to tell her yes, but before I could answer, a faint noise drifted in from outside. A soft, deliberate sound. Tap, tap, tap. From the window behind us. "You're not supposed to see him outside the diner." Melanie's voice cut through the thick silence like a blade. She wasn't accusing. She wasn't even surprised, just tired. I sat across from her inside the small break room of Lone Star Diner. The fluorescent light overhead buzzed faintly as dust particles drifted like lazy snowflakes in the stale air. My hands trembled around the cheap styrofoam cup of burnt coffee. The weight pressing against my chest felt unbearable. "It wasn't just once," I finally whispered. Melanie nodded, unsurprised. "It never is," I swallowed hard. "He's different outside. It's not like the wanderer inside the diner. This one, he changes." Melanie's face hardened slightly, her voice dropping even lower. "That's because it's not him outside, not exactly." The air between us grew heavier. I'd held my silence for weeks. I'd played by the rules, clinging to the fragile order Lone Star Diner demanded. But now, after the tapping, the neighbor, the vanishing house, it was impossible to pretend anymore. "Melanie," I said, my voice trembling, "what the hell is he?" Her eyes narrowed for a moment, as though weighing whether to finally tell me the thing we both knew was long overdue. After what felt like an eternity, she exhaled sharply. "You've heard them call him the Wanderer, right?" I nodded. "That's not a name we gave him," she continued. "That's what the file says. The federal file, his official designation." "Designation?" I echoed. "You mean the government classifies him?" Melanie's lips tightened. "Daniel, Lone Star isn't just some odd roadside diner with weird local legends. This place is a perimeter, a threshold, and he is one of several." My stomach turned. "Several?" She nodded grimly. "Entities. Visitors. Not human. Not ghosts. Not demons. Not exactly. They don't belong here, but they exist here anyway. And for some reason, this one, the one we call the Wanderer, anchors himself to this diner." I stared at her, unable to find words. Melanie leaned closer, lowering her voice into a near whisper. "Lone Star was built here because this is one of the few thin spots. Places where the barrier between here and there gets weaker." I could feel my breathing quicken. "Like a doorway?" "More like a crack in the foundation," she said bitterly. "And cracks are easier to widen than they are to close." The hair on my arm stood on end. Everything she was saying sounded impossible, and yet every part of me knew it was true. Then who's monitoring it? Those agents? The government? Melanie shook her head slightly. "They don't monitor him to stop him. They monitor him to learn from him." The thought made my skin crawl. "But people are disappearing." Her voice hardened. "And they always will, if they break the rule." That night, after my shift ended, I couldn't bring myself to go home right away. Instead, I sat in my car parked along the outskirts of the desert highway, staring up at the vast, merciless stretch of stars. Out here, the night sky felt infinite, oppressive, like something was waiting just beyond the visible horizon, pressing against the fabric of our world. I thought about Alicia's description again. The grin, the two long arms, the tapping, and how he always knew exactly which window to appear at, which room. He wasn't guessing, he was watching. Somehow, this was no longer confined to the diner. The rules were bleeding into my life, or worse. The rules had never truly stopped at Lone Star. That was just one fracture point, a public one. But in the privacy of people's homes, where no one could intervene, perhaps it was always much, much worse. The next day, the agents returned. Their arrival was always quiet, almost ritualistic. 2 black SUVs. No sirens, no commotion. They parked near the back entrance and entered through the kitchen like they owned the place, which, I was starting to realize, they probably did. Special Agent Cole stood waiting for me near the register, as if he had known exactly when I would arrive. "Mr. Carter," he greeted, his voice as cold as ever. I swallowed. "You're back early." He ignored the comment, his tone flat. "We're escalating containment procedures." That phrase chilled me to the bone. Containment, like the Wanderer was some experiment. "There's been an event outside the primary perimeter," Cole continued, eyes drilling into mine. We know you've had contact. I stiffened. I haven't spoken to him. You don't need to speak to him for the contamination to spread, Cole said evenly. Observation is sometimes enough. Contamination! That word twisted in my gut. Cole stepped closer, lowering his voice. Mr. Carter, you need to understand something critical. What you're dealing with isn't merely a physical anomaly. You are experiencing a psychological intrusion. These entities, they test boundaries. They probe vulnerabilities. He paused, his expression utterly devoid of empathy. They get inside. I clenched my fists. My kids, my daughter, she's seen him. For the first time, Cole's expression flickered. Something almost resembling concern or calculation. That complicates matters. Complicates? My voice cracked, anger surging. Do something, damn it. He's targeting my family. Cole's jaw tensed. You should have reported it sooner. I wanted to scream at him, but something in his eyes stopped me cold. Not fear, not anger, resignation. I've seen this before, Mr. Carter, he said softly. Once he extends beyond his point of origin, it's difficult to put him back. Can you stop him? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Cole, he simply turned and walked toward the rear kitchen entrance where his agents waited, leaving me standing in the hollow shell of the diner. That night, after putting the kids to bed, I sat alone at the kitchen table, lights off, staring at my front window. At 3:03 a.m., I saw movement across the street. The neighbor's house, which had supposedly been empty, glowed faintly from within. And there, standing perfectly still in the illuminated window, was him, no longer bothering to hide, just watching, waiting. The smile stretched wider than ever. I didn't sleep that night. Even after the light inside the neighbor's house finally dimmed, even after the silhouette vanished once more into the unnatural stillness, my body refused to relax. My mind ran in tight, panicked loops. Every creak of the house, every shifting shadow under the moonlight, every breath of wind scraping against the window made my stomach tighten into knots. The rules were unraveling. Whatever fragile agreement held the wanderer within the walls of Lone Star Diner was losing its grip. I had witnessed him standing in my neighborhood, no longer content to merely observe from within the diner's cracked reality. He was reaching, feeling his way outward, one house at a time, one family at a time. My family. The next morning, as I drove Alicia and Jay to school, Alicia's small voice broke the silence from the back seat. "Daddy," she whispered. His arms were longer again. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. His head, she hesitated as if struggling to find the words. It bent. I looked at her through the rearview mirror. She hugged her stuffed bear to her chest, eyes wide, trying to be brave. "Bent how, sweetheart?" I asked gently. Her tiny hands mimed the disturbing image, tilting her head far to one side, much farther than any human neck should bend, almost unnaturally horizontal. Like this, my breath caught in my throat. Jay, oblivious or perhaps blessedly too young to grasp the horror, simply played with his toy quietly beside her. I forced a smile I didn't feel. "Thank you for telling me, honey. You're very brave." But inside, I was unraveling. Later that day, after work, I found myself once again outside the diner's rear lot as the black SUVs pulled up under the blazing afternoon sun. Agent Cole stepped out, flanked by two of his silent, interchangeable subordinates. His expression was tight, more strained than usual. Without preamble, he spoke. "There's been a containment breach." The words hung in the air like toxic gas. "Another one?" I asked, my throat dry. Cole's gaze hardened. "You already know who." I didn't need him to say it. The Wanderer, or whatever fragment of him was spilling into my home. We sat inside the diner's office, a space I had never been invited into before. The room was cold and sparse, filled with government-grade filing cabinets, sealed crates, and strange humming equipment I didn't recognize. Cole spoke as if reading from some internal manual burned into his mind. "The entity you refer to as the Wanderer has extended beyond his primary anchor point. That was not supposed to happen. But we knew eventually it might. I leaned forward, trying to steady my voice. So, what now? You're going to stop him, right? Contain him? Cole's eyes shifted slightly, just enough to let me know how naive my question was. That's complicated, he said carefully. Containment works inside established parameters. Lone Star was designed as a controlled environment. Once the subject migrates beyond that field, traditional countermeasures become less effective. I stared at him in disbelief. You can't stop him, can you? Cole's silence was answer enough. I exhaled sharply, my stomach twisting. My kids? My daughter? He's targeting them? Why? His response came after a long pause, spoken so softly it barely carried across the desk. Because you saw him, because you interacted, because Alicia saw him too. But we followed the rules, I hissed. There are rules even we don't fully understand. Cole's voice darkened. This is not a game of cause and effect, Mr. Carter. These entities, they notice attention, curiosity, fear. Every interaction is like feeding breadcrumbs to something that should never be fed. And children are especially vulnerable. I buried my head in my hands. Are not just watching us, are they? I whispered. No. Cole said flatly. They're studying us. That night, I didn't let the kids sleep in their own room. Instead, I dragged their mattresses into my bedroom. I checked every lock, every window, every entrance, over and over, and still, I knew it wouldn't matter. The tapping came again, around 3:15 IEWM, softer this time, almost gentle. Tap, tap, tap. From multiple windows at once. I clutched the shotgun I had retrieved earlier from the attic, a desperate, useless comfort. My pulse hammered against my ribs as I moved toward the bedroom window, pulling the curtain aside just an inch. The backyard was empty, but my eyes locked on the faint impression in the grass, large, heavy footprints that sank unnaturally deep into the dirt, and then something new. From the corner of my eye, near the old oak tree at the edge of my property line, I saw him, or rather, I saw them. Not one, three. 3 figures stood in the moonlight, long, grotesque silhouettes, arms dangling low, heads tilting in impossible angles, all watching, all smiling. The wanderer was no longer alone. They're multiplying. That was all Agent Cole had said before abruptly ending the last conversation we had. His voice low, almost defeated. And now, standing alone in my darkened living room, I finally understood the weight behind his words. 3 of them. 3 grotesque silhouettes now prowled just beyond the thin safety of my window. Whatever fragile balance had held the wanderer in place at Lone Star was disintegrating, and with it came others. Copies? Variants? I didn't know. I wasn't sure anyone did, but they were here, and they were growing bolder. The following morning was the first time I'd truly debated packing up my children and running. Fleeing the town entirely, driving across state lines if I had to, starting over somewhere far away from this cursed perimeter. But even as the thought formed, I felt that tightening in my chest, that instinctive primal dread that whispered, it won't matter. Because this wasn't something physical. This wasn't a man hunting us. It wasn't even tied strictly to a location anymore. They had seen us, and once seen, there was no unseeing. Wherever we went, the crack between worlds would follow. Still, desperation gnawed at me. I couldn't sit by and wait for them to take my children like they had taken Malcolm, which is why, for the first time since all of this began, I returned to the source. I drove back to Lone Star Diner. The diner felt different now, heavier, as if the air had thickened somehow. Melanie was already there, wiping down tables, pretending, like always, that everything was fine, but the haunted look behind her eyes betrayed her. She didn't flinch when she saw me walk in. You shouldn't be here right now, she said flatly. I don't have a choice, I replied. She sighed deeply, as if preparing herself for a conversation she'd long avoided. It's happening faster than they expected. I said, lowering my voice. He's splitting. He's not just appearing at the diner anymore. He's branching out. I know. You know? My voice cracked. And you didn't think to tell me? Melanie's gaze hardened. Because knowing doesn't help. Because it never helped any of the others. She glanced around the diner, lowering her voice even further. There've been others like you, Daniel. Other employees who tried to ask too many questions, who saw too much. Every time the Wanderer multiplied, someone had already invited him closer by staring too long, by trying to understand. Curiosity feeds him. That's part of the rules. I felt my stomach drop. But I didn't invite him into my home, I whispered. You don't have to, she exhaled sharply. Once your daughter saw him, really saw him, he marked her. That's why he's there now. The children are always easier prey. I staggered back, nausea rising. Then how do we stop it? There has to be a way. Melanie's face twisted as though she hated the answer even before speaking it. There isn't a way to stop him. Not entirely. The best we've ever done is manage him, isolate him, keep him here. She gestured vaguely around the diner. But he slipped out. Now he's fragmenting. And you, your family, are part of that fracture. I gripped the counter to steady myself. My mind reeled. Cole said containment isn't working anymore, I said. What happens when containment fully breaks? Melanie's voice dropped to little more than a whisper. Then Lone Star won't be the only thin place. And he won't be the Wanderer anymore. I swallowed hard. What will he be? Her eyes met mine, hollow and terrified. They'll become Legion. The name settled over me like a fog. Legion. Multiple. Endless. A kind of infection, spreading one host at a time, one observer at a time. They're not just visitors, I whispered aloud, mostly to myself. They're parasites. Melanie nodded, and Lone Star is their feeding ground. Always has been. I pressed forward. Then tell me something useful. Tell me why the diner exists in the first place. Who set it up? Who's behind this? Melanie hesitated, truly hesitated. For the first time since I'd known her, her lips trembled as she finally whispered, It wasn't the government. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. The diner was here long before the agency showed up, she said softly. Before the agents. Before me. The government only discovered it after incidents. Lone Star was built around an already existing fracture point. They didn't create it. They only monitor it now. Study it. But the crack itself, that's much older. Older than what? I asked. Older than us. The room felt colder suddenly, as if some invisible hand was pressing against the walls of reality itself. Melanie looked over her shoulder, her voice barely audible now. The stories say it was never supposed to open. That something reached through long ago, and we've been living next to that hole ever since. My legs felt weak. My head pounded with 1,000 questions I couldn't form into words. You need to go home, Daniel, Melanie finally said. Go now. Be with your kids. Protect them however you can. But how, whatever happens next is coming fast. She paused, before adding, almost as an afterthought, tonight will be different. And she was right. That night, as the clock crept past 3 a.m., the tapping didn't come. Instead came knocking. Soft, rhythmic, deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. Knock, not from the windows this time, but from the front door. The knocking continued. Knock, knock, knock. Steady, patient, like whoever, or whatever, stood on the other side knew there was no need to rush. My pulse hammered so loud in my ears it felt like my skull might split. I stood frozen in the middle of the living room, shotgun in hand, staring at the front door. The weak porch light barely illuminated the thin crack beneath the frame. No shadows, no movement. But they were there. I knew it. Behind me, both Alicia and Jay were huddled together on the couch. blankets wrapped around their small bodies. Alicia clutched her brother protectively, wide-eyed but silent. She was far too still for an 8-year-old, as if instinct had already taught her what even adults struggle to learn: how to shrink, how to disappear, how to not draw attention. Knock, knock. My mouth was dry as sandpaper. My legs trembled, but I forced them to take a step forward. "Stay here," I whispered without turning. Alicia's small voice trembled behind me. "Daddy." "Don't open it." "I won't," I lied. But even as the words left my lips, I wasn't sure that was true. I approached the door slowly, eyes darting to the peephole. Empty. The narrow fisheye lens showed nothing but the darkness of my porch, but the knocking continued. Louder now. Knock, knock, knock! My hand hovered near the doorknob, and that's when I heard it. A voice, soft, wrong, not coming from outside, but inside my head. "You've already seen us, Daniel. You've already invited us in." I staggered backward, almost dropping the shotgun. The voice wasn't mine, wasn't even male or female. It was more like 1,000 whispering echoes stacked atop one another, bleeding into my thoughts like oil into water. I clenched my teeth, trying to block it out. "You don't belong here," I hissed. The whispers pulsed again, stronger. "Neither do you." And then, without warning, the knocking stopped. A suffocating silence fell over the house. For a moment, I dared to believe they had gone. But then the door handle twitched. Not violently, not forced, just a slow, careful turn, as if testing whether I had locked it. I had. The knob stopped turning. Another beat of stillness. Then, a scraping. Long, deliberate fingernails. Or something worse, tracing slow circles across the wood. I backed away, pulse racing, sweat pouring down my face. My fingers gripped the shotgun tighter, but even as I held it, I knew it was useless. Guns don't work on things that don't fully exist here. Suddenly, every window in the house erupted with sound. Tap, tap, tap. Dozens of points. Front window, kitchen window, kid's bedroom, bathroom, all of them. As if invisible hands pressed in from every angle, tapping in unison, a symphony of intrusion. The walls of my home, my supposed safe place, were nothing but thin paper to them. I dropped to my knees, holding my head as the whispers grew louder, drowning out everything. "Your world is thin, Daniel. The cracks are widening. Soon you will see us fully. Soon you will join us." Tears streamed down my face. I couldn't breathe. The air felt heavy, thick like syrup. My vision blurred at the edges. Alicia's small voice somehow pierced through the storm. "Daddy, look!" I snapped my head up. She was pointing at the front window. And through the thin curtain, illuminated by the moonlight, I finally saw it. Not just a figure, not the neighbor, not the lone wanderer, but all of them. Dozens of tall, impossible shapes gathered silently outside my home. Limbs bending at unnatural angles, heads tilted grotesquely far to the sides, their long, thin arms stretched and dragged across my siding, tapping like the legs of monstrous spiders. But worse than their forms were their faces. They were changing. Each grinning mask shifted subtly as I stared, until they were no longer just blank, featureless horrors. They wore familiar faces. Faces from my life. Coworkers, old friends, my parents, even my children's features briefly distorted into their endlessly smiling masks before warping again. Mocking me. Breaking me. The whispers returned, unified and unbearable. "We know you now. We've taken your image. You have no place left to hide." That's when I heard a new sound. Behind me, from inside the house. A soft creak from the hallway. I spun around, shotgun raised, but nothing was there, except the bedroom door. Wide open. Jay was still clutching Alicia on the couch, which meant whoever, or whatever, had opened that door was already inside. The first thing I saw were its hands, long pale fingers, Far too many joints, bending at impossible angles, sliding slowly around the frame of the open bedroom door. Fingernails black and tapered, dragging along the wood as though savoring the feel of my home, of my reality. My pulse froze as the rest of its form began to emerge, stepping halfway into the hallway light, but never fully. The thing was tall, nearly brushing the top of the frame, its elongated head slightly tilted as it studied me in a sick mockery of curiosity. Even now, after everything I had witnessed, the way it moved shattered some primitive corner of my brain that still wanted to believe in natural law. It does not move like us, and worst of all, its face. It wore my face. Not perfectly, but close enough, like a cheap imitation stretched too thin across something else entirely. My own eyes staring back at me, dead and empty, my mouth pulled wide into a grin that didn't belong to any human. I barely registered that I was backing up, trying to shield Alicia and Jay behind me. The shotgun felt like a child's toy in my grip now. The creature tilted its head further, almost studying my fear like it was learning. And then the voice came. Not from its mouth, but directly into my head, just as before. Only this time, it was clearer, closer. We are crossing now. The barrier thins. The observer becomes the vessel. My chest tightened, nausea swirling. "Stay back," I whispered hoarsely, though I knew it was pointless. Alicia clutched my leg tightly, her tiny voice trembling. "Daddy, why does it look like you?" "I don't know, baby," I choked. "But you're not going to let it take you. Not tonight." Suddenly, a loud burst shattered the tension. Boom! The front door exploded inward. Government agents stormed inside, 6 of them in full tactical gear, weapons drawn, floodlights sweeping every corner. "Federal containment! Down now!" one of them shouted. Agent Cole followed directly behind them, his expression grave but controlled as always. The moment the creature in the hallway saw the agents, it reacted. Not like prey cornered, but more like something amused. It didn't retreat. Instead, its head twisted violently, snapping nearly 180 degrees as though taunting them. The agents hesitated, clearly unnerved. "Do not fire!" Cole barked sharply. "Containment only!" 2 agents rushed toward me, pulling Alicia and Jay away toward the kitchen while another agent physically dragged me to my feet. My body felt like lead, my eyes locked on the thing wearing my face. "What is it?" I gasped, my voice cracking. Cole's voice was low, urgent, a breach beyond classification. "You were supposed to remain an observer, Daniel. You broke protocol. I never wanted any of this. And yet it's here," he cut me off coldly. As the agents moved to encircle the creature, a second more horrifying realization dawned. The walls of my home began to ripple. Not physically, but as if a heat wave passed through solid matter. Reality itself wavered, flickered, unstable. Behind the creature's form, cracks of blackness widened like spiderweb fractures along an invisible membrane. Shapes shifted behind them, more forms pressing against the thinning veil. Not just reflections anymore. They were coming through, one by one, multiple wanderers, all with different faces. My coworkers, my parents, even twisted versions of Alicia and Jay, grinning copies forming behind the cracks. The Legion. "They can't stop it, can they?" I rasped. Cole didn't answer right away. He simply stared at the widening fracture. "This isn't a simple containment failure anymore. This is expansion. The thin place is fully collapsed." His voice lowered further. "And it's using you to stabilize the entry point." My stomach twisted. Me? My family? We're the anchor now. Cole continued, his voice grim. "It feeds on perception. Observation fuels it. Your interaction allowed it to wear you, your family's faces, as conduits." As he spoke, my vision began to warp, the air shimmering, the whispers rising in volume. "Join, join, join!" The agents were shouting, but their words dissolved into meaningless noise. The Legion pressed harder against the cracks, bodies half-phased into our world, their hands stretching further, their grins wider. And then, a new sound cut through everything. A deep metallic hum, a low-frequency vibration that made my teeth rattle and my skin prickle. The agents pulled out a large box-like device, pulsing with light. Whatever technology it wasn't made for human hands. Cole shouted above the noise. "EMP barrier activated, limited disruption, buying time only." The air snapped sharply as the rippling slowed, just barely. The cracks pulsed and hesitated. The Legion writhed as if in discomfort, struggling to fully cross over. For the first time, something resembling pain flickered through their frozen grins. It wouldn't last long. Cole grabbed my shoulder. "You need to make a choice, Daniel." "What choice?" "The entities feed on connection," he said. "You're the entry point, you or your children." My heart stopped. His voice was merciless. "We sever the anchor, or they come through entirely." Tears welled in my eyes as my mind shattered between horror and clarity. One sacrifice, or endless invasion. Behind me, Alicia sobbed softly. "Daddy, I don't want to go." The choice was mine, and time was running out. Time fractured into something unreal. The pulsing hum of the EMP barrier rattled the walls, holding back the advancing horde of the Legion. But only barely. The shimmering air flickered with each surge, as though the fabric of my home was on the verge of dissolving into something else entirely. Agent Cole's voice cut through the storm, sharp, surgical. "You need to decide now." I stared at him, at the device buzzing violently in his hands, and at the army of twisted, grinning reflections pressing against the thin membrane of what remained of my reality. My own face grinned back at me from a dozen places. My children's faces, their impossibly wide smiles stretching across monstrous, elongated heads. They were already inside me. My hand shook uncontrollably. I can't." Cole's eyes narrowed. "Yes, you can." Behind me, Alicia's terrified voice broke through the madness. "Daddy?" I turned, seeing my children's faces. Not the ones in the shifting void, but the real ones. Small, human, fragile. Their tears cut deeper than any horror surrounding us. One anchor must be severed. Cole's words echoed. I could barely breathe. My mind tore in two as the choice loomed like a guillotine above me. My life for theirs. But even as terror crushed me, another voice, not Cole's, whispered inside my head. "They do not understand us, Daniel. They offer you sacrifice. We offer you release." The whisper surged louder, softer, seductive. "There is no need for pain, no need for death. Let go." And for a terrifying moment, I wanted to, because the truth slithered into my thoughts like a parasite. This was never a fight I could win. The agents weren't here to stop the Wanderer. They were here to study it. And to control me, to control us. Cole wasn't my savior, he was containment. I was containment. I was always part of their experiment. As if sensing my doubt, Cole suddenly snapped, voice sharp with panic. "Daniel, listen to me. If you hesitate any longer, we'll lose full stabilization. This is your only chance." But something broke inside me. "No," I whispered. "No more rules." Cole's face twitched. "What are you doing?" I stepped forward toward the fractures, the swirling shapes pressing against the barrier. Toward them, the whispers erupted. "Yes, Daniel, cross, merge." The agents behind me shouted warnings I couldn't hear. Lights flickered violently. The EMP barrier buckled under the weight of my choice. Cole lunged forward, grabbing my arm, his voice now filled with desperation. "You don't understand what you're letting in." I stared him in the eyes, my voice eerily calm. "Neither do you." And then I stepped through. The barrier ruptured like glass. Time slowed, or perhaps ceased entirely. For one infinite second, I stood between two worlds, the physical reality behind me and the writhing abyss ahead, filled with countless shapes folding into themselves, merging, separating, like living fractals. The Legion surrounded me, towering, formless things draped in stolen skins, cycling through faces and voices at impossible speeds. Their grins widened, becoming grotesque, almost joyful. And yet, they did not consume me, because I was already theirs. Then, something unexpected happened. As I stood submerged in the tide of beings, I began to understand. The rules didn't bind them, they bound us. The agents, the diner, the containment, everything built to cage the anomaly was a ritual of fear, of control. But the entities didn't feed on fear itself. They fed on the struggle, on the desperate attempt to deny their existence. That was the true ritual, and I had broken it. In letting go, in no longer resisting, I severed my value as an anchor. I was irrelevant. Suddenly, the Legion shifted. Their whispers quieted. One by one, their countless eyes turned away from me, like predators losing interest in prey no longer worth chasing. The cracks that had pulsed so violently only moments ago stopped widening, stabilized. The chaotic storm of merging forms slowed. Some retreated entirely. The air cleared. Behind me, I heard Cole shouting to his agents. Their equipment surged back to life. The EMP stabilizer regaining partial control as the breach narrowed, reasserting a fragile boundary. I stumbled backward through the thin veil, collapsing into my living room. Everything fell deathly silent. The Legion was gone, for now. Only a faint hum remained, as if the walls still vibrated from the rupture. The agents scrambled around me, checking their instruments, sealing the fracture as best they could. Cole stood above me, breathing hard, eyes wide. What did you do?" he rasped. I met his gaze, voice hollow. "I let them go." He stared at me as if I'd grown another head. "You're lucky," he said finally. "Luckier than you know." But I knew better. There was no luck here, only delay. I stood outside beneath the wide, empty sky. For the first time in weeks, no tapping came from the windows, no whispers, no grins. But deep inside, I felt it. A lingering thread. The Legion wasn't gone, they had simply chosen to step back. For now. But the fracture remained. And as I looked up at the endless stars, a cold truth settled over me. There are more cracks than anyone knows, more doors than anyone sees, and one day, they will step through again. Thank you for joining me on this unsettling journey into the unknown. In a world where some doors are better left closed, the Wanderer reminds us that curiosity can be both a gift and a curse. The thin places between our world and others may never fully vanish. We can only hope to survive long enough not to look too closely. If you enjoyed this story and want more tales of ritual horror, unspeakable forces, and the terrifying unknown, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to never miss another nightmare. Stay curious, stay cautious, and remember, not every knock deserves an answer.